we'll start officially.
Sure.
Nashville is mostly associated with country music. How is the non-country music scene?
It's a good question.
It's here. There's more and more diverse music coming to Nashville. There's a pop community here that encourages a lot of those artists to collaborate and get together. And there's like a DIY indie scene that's starting to brew. And there are little like venues that are super under the radar. It's definitely becoming more of a music town instead of being a country music town. But it's great. Yeah.
That's good. How did you guys decide on Nashville instead of staying in New York?
Oh, I think that one was probably led by me. I toured through Nashville a number of times, with Jesse a few times, and then in another band after that. And I always really liked the feel of Nashville. It was really, this was, 2012, 13, 14, it was smaller even then than it is now, but it felt like there was good energy. There were a lot of creative people. There were new things happening, and it was a fraction of the cost of living in New York. And in thinking about, taking those next life steps in a city like New York as a creative, there's a lot to consider when it comes to cost of living and what kind of employment will I require, and what will I commit myself to in order to just be in this location. And it started to make less and less sense to me to, take those next steps in life in a place where I didn't know if it entirely aligned. The goals of my, creative mind were maybe not aligned with the financial reality of living in a high cost of living area. So I really loved Nashville, and I convinced my husband to move. And then I convinced Jesse to move. I don't know if I did, but he definitely considered it there.
It was, obviously it played a role, but my wife and I were just looking to get out of New York because I was done with it. I was like on a subway in winter time, and in New York in the winter, you have to bundle up a lot, but then as soon as you get on the subway, there's 100 people in there and it's like 90 degrees. And so you're just kind of uncomfortable, sweating, and I'm sitting there being miserable about that. And then I have this woman's frizzy hair is in my mouth, and then somebody farts and it smells really bad. And I was already kind of at a point where I was like, I gotta get out of here. And I went home that day and I was like, we're gonna leave this city. And so we started mapping out different cities we were interested in. And Nashville was not actually on that list, but then we went to visit Suzie and Brian, and we loved it, and we had a great time. And then we came back, and we had a month before we had to either renew our lease or figure out where we were going to go. And we hadn't visited any of the cities that we were looking at, so we were like, Nashville seems fine. Let's go for a year and check it out. And then we've been here for 7 years now.
That's awesome. In your latest EP, New Anxieties, how does it feel to have Suzie's vocal stepping into the spotlight, so to speak, and Jesse, yours kind of just being more supportive?
Yeah, I've been in I've written songs in the year. So both Suzie and I had 2 kids in the last 6-ish years. And that takes a lot out of you. And I think it takes a lot out of you in different ways, maybe depending on who you are. And there was a time after my daughter was born where I did have this kind of freedom of mind for a little bit, where I wrote a bunch of stuff, and that's been kind of just sitting on a shelf. And then at some point after my son was born, I was like, I need to do some writing because I haven't in so many years. And I wrote a handful of songs then, just kind of getting into it and be like, can I still do this? And I had some songs there that are also sitting out in sort of the ether. But I was in a weird funky place in terms of writing, and Suzie was just like, I have songs, and she started really dedicating herself to waking up every morning and trying to write songs. She was like, I have songs, let's work on them. And everybody had like a COVID hobby that they picked up, you know. For me, I got into this mode where I was like, I started to feel limited in my music by feeling like I had to lean too much on other people, like producers and mix engineers and whatever else. So I started to get into trying to more self-produce and self-arrange, and I was kind of experimenting with that with my own things. And then Suzie started sending me her stuff, and I just started to kind of like produce, arrange around all of that. And that felt liberating to me because I felt like this was a different sort of unlock in terms of being able to express my musical creativity that I hadn't really explored as much before. You know, other than when we stepped into the studio with a producer, and then we always like, you know, we were always collaborative in that environment. It was never like, here's a song and then somebody else did something with it. But now I felt like, okay, this is all me right now, and I'm controlling what's happening here. And that felt like a different way to like tap into what I need from a music perspective. It was a lot less stressful for me trying to sit there, like, you know, when you're trying to write a song and you're not really in the emotional state for it, it's very frustrating and can be really defeating also if you don't produce something that feels like a good output. So this was like a very low risk for me because, you know, for most of these, one of the songs we actually did really co-write. It was very much like a joint thing. But three of them, the three that are released so far, they were really like Suzie's babies, and they came to me and I just dressed them up basically. And it was like a different way for us to work together, but I really liked it. And I think we've always sort of operated in a way where whoever kind of the song stems from takes the spotlight on the vocal front. And there's probably a bunch of reasons for that, but I've never felt like, hey, I need to be on most of the songs. I used to be very prolific and write a lot, and Suzie used to really not write that many songs. And then now we've kind of reversed. So that's really all that it came down to at the end of the day.
An ideal partnership where when one person needs to take a break, the other person steps up and fills the space.
That's really good. So it was more natural than like intentional. It was like an expression. Okay, that's great. So
yeah, for sure.
What is the creative process? I know you guys spoke this, you said that ideas will come and go, but do you guys have a creative process? Like we're going to sit down and write, or is it fly by the seat of your pants?
Column A, column B. I think that the process is we write independently, typically to start. Although, no, it really is. I mean, sometimes songs start that way, and sometimes we get together in a room and we just we just mess around with some ideas. Like we have, I think, some newer things that we're working on that are very like low, in terms of their finish level at the moment. They're ideas that we've come up with in the room. They're cool and they're different. But when we started working together, our writing process really was one person came up with some kind of seed idea or a core, component of a song, or maybe even the whole song, and then we would come into the room together and we would play those things together on our real instruments, and I would play them on the keys and Jesse would play them on the guitar, and we would have, other friends that were involved, drummers, bass players, and we would really kind of shape them like a band. And in the room now it's shifted to that sort of independent writing, and then we'll share files, right? Because it's like what happened with COVID, everything kind of got a little digital for us, and I'll write it independently on my keyboard or on, at home, and then I'll put that into a session, and then I'll send that session to Jesse, and then Jesse will work on that on his end and send it back to me. And now that we have been able to get back together, it's like sort of a hybrid of all of these things where it will start as with one of us, and then a little bit produced, and then we'll come together in the room and like really work through it. I mean, just the other day we were up in my studio at my house with a song that I had started that was like fairly half-baked, but I thought had potential, and I mean, we were right there together, like line by line, going through potential lyric ideas, through, what the rhythm of the lines would be. So it really just depends. I think we've been working together for so many years that we have evolved as writers and as creative people. So we sometimes can pull from like a toolbox from ages ago, and then also, do something that is new because we've acquired some new skill or have taken interest in some other piece of the puzzle. So it varies a lot.
It was a great answer.
Oh, thank you.
Nothing to add.
So how is creating New Anxieties different from past albums and EPs?
Oh, I think for sure the consistency. It's so interesting. Higher, which is the one that we will release soon, and the one that is really the most hybrid writing, situation, where Jesse put together that track before it was a song and sent it to me, and I top lined it, as they might say in the industry, where I came up with, sort of the chorus of the song, the melody, and then we ended up coming back and forth and writing the verse lyrics together and the verses like that. It actually started the whole thing in a weird way, because it was Jesse leaning into doing production for in his earliest sort of stages, and it inspired me, and I dug into production a little bit, but the difference really was that, we started with these basic productions that both Jesse and I did, and then expanded upon them with the help of the other person, and then eventually with our producer Brian. And I think it was different in that it was a lot of it was electronic, heavily electronic, compared to past records, which have been very live band focused. This one still has obviously, real guitars and bass, and occasionally, some kind of a tap, the percussive thing that's real, but so much of it is software instruments at this point. And I think that's probably the biggest change. Would you say that too, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, there's a cadence difference too, which I think we did discuss a little bit. But I mean, that a lot of that digitization of our process has driven that. We used to basically get in a room, me and Suzie, until we felt like we had a good song, right? And then we get a drummer and a bassist together, and we get in a room with them, and then we just sit there, whether it was me and Suzie or a band environment. We would just loop parts over and over again, feeling things out, right? Sit there maybe for 4 or 6 hours on one song, just looping the parts over and over again, finding that's the thing that feels right. But in a room with musicians organically. Now, I mean, I don't know what you do with these tracks, Suzie, but I sit there and I'm looping them over and over, the same part over and over again, playing different things, trying different things. So it's more siloed, I think, in those regards. And I do think there is a difference in terms of somebody comes into a room and they play something on a piano or on a guitar and sing something, and hey, what do you think of this? Versus everything Suzie was sending me were vocal, at least one key part, and usually actually a drum track, which that's probably one of my weaknesses overall is figuring out what to do with drums. And everything she sent instantly at least inspired me to be oh, this already sounds good, and I can kind of tweak this, or in some cases maybe I don't have to. So there was a big difference in terms of what we were coming to each other with, and I think because of the tools we're using also, yeah, the whole process feels very novel in terms of what we've done previously.
Did you learn anything new about yourselves or the band during the process?
I've definitely, I don't have a lot of faith in myself in general about things, and I often will especially with music, if I start to try to write, I talked before about being frustrated, not being able to get an idea out that you're happy with. And a lot of times what I start to do is I start to doubt my ability to even do that anymore. Did it disappear? Does that thing come and go or not? And usually what winds up happening is something comes out eventually where I'm I still got it, But this is a whole new world for me, where I started exploring it, and I was I'm just going to try. I also do have a lot of blind sort of arrogance, I think, where I'm if I just try it, I can do it, which has benefited me in many ways in my life. But I started trying to do it because not really thinking about it. I was I could do this. And then I started to get into it. And the more that further I got, and probably the better at it I got, the more I started to doubt my own position around it and like whether or not it was good enough. And even today, I'm like, I can count my weaknesses. You know, I look at them all, and I know that I couldn't actually take a song from start to finish myself right now. We still need other people to come in and polish things and listen. I mean, I like collaboration a lot, but I think one thing that I've learned is that like I actually can do this pretty well, like better than maybe I expected that I'd be able to, and even in terms of learning the software and everything, like I feel like an old man a lot of times in my life at this point. I'm like learning new things is hard. And I was like, I kind of like got the hang of it. So yeah, I don't know. It's been a big thing for me.
Yeah, I think that I've learned more to trust my ear, because I think with the format being different and writing something and translating it into a recording on my own, which was the thing that I hadn't really done much before, I would always approach it with this disclaimer, like, oh, but like, it's not, doesn't have to be the sound. Oh, this is just like a placeholder sound, but you'll get the idea, you know. And that was always the approach that I took. And I think over the course of writing these songs and hearing feedback from Jesse and, you know, feedback from Brian and, you know, anyone that sort of was like working with us on it, I give that disclaimer and they'd be like, no, but I like that sound. Like, I like that sound. It's a good sound. Like, it sounds good. You know, I'd be like, oh, like, really? So learning to trust myself, learning to trust that what I'm hearing is inspiring me, and the reason that I'm leaving it in the recording or in the demo is because something about it spoke to me. That I think was probably new, since I was ready to just throw my own opinion out the window first. and you know, take anyone else's opinion over mine. So now I'm a little bit more attached to some of my ideas.
No longer a people pleaser.
Well, I'm still a people pleaser, unfortunately, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Was there a song that was harder to record than others?
Let's think. I don't think for me, I don't think so. I think there were some parts, like we came back to recording the chorus or the bridge for Crushed. I went in and I recorded that, and I just didn't feel like I nailed it. And it just didn't feel like it was the final vocal for that. So I went back to it the next day. Like I went to my voice teacher with that song, like, help, it's not doing what I want to do. And we were able to, you know, go in again and then re-record it and get the takes that we wanted. And so it was kind of a nice, it was nice to know that you can practice your way through something and get a good result. It was a little bit of a challenge.
Do you have one, Jesse?
I don't know. I mean, I think the unreleased track Higher, it feels like more, like Suzie said, it was the first, and it's the last that we're releasing, the last that we actually finish. And I feel like the whole process felt a lot more hodgepodgey, like in general. And there were a lot of things. I mean, talking about bridges, I think we like didn't have a bridge for that. And then I don't know, came back to that song like many months, or I don't know, even a year after we kind of had worked on it for a while and threw something together in there. But that track took a while to really actually, I think, glue itself together. But now I think it sounds great.
What's in store for 2024?
Ooh. We've talked about it. We are launching a Patreon.
Nice.
So that's exciting. And I think we are going to put a little bit more focus on releasing with a cadence, you know, like with this, you know, kind of like every few, you know, month, like every six weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to try and kind of keep on producing and releasing, because we're really good at delaying releasing material. It's one of our absolute specialties, actually. So we've sort of committed ourselves, you know, we have these conversations a lot because I think we're both really ambitious and we love to do stuff, and I love to play live, and like I love to record, and I love to write, and I love to come up with new merch, and we want to do all the things, but we sort of also have to prioritize them and say, like, what do we actually have the ability to do, and what are we going to do well? So I think this year we decided the thing to do is to lean into, you know, creating a Patreon community and releasing with consistency for that community, you know, and giving them like exclusive access to things earlier before we release them sort of in a wider way. And I'm hoping to release some music of my own this year. I worked on some solo stuff over the last year, so I think that's on the horizon for me as well.
It's tough, I think, to be a musician that's not making a full-time living from your music and continue that. And we never really, I mean, we had a period where that's what we were doing full-time, but I wouldn't say we were making a full-time living, really. Like, you know, all of the money went back into the band ultimately. Gas money, hotels, whatever it was, recording, obviously. But, you know, now we have full-time jobs, we have families, there's a lot to juggle. I think, you know, and really working your music is a business at the end of the day. I mean, even just managing social media accounts can be a full-time job, which is why, you know, you have artists who, when they get big enough, they don't do any of that stuff themselves, right? A lot of them don't even write the music anymore. Like, you know, they'll pick whatever battle they want to fight. Maybe that's just tanning on a yacht somewhere, and that's, you know, that's a hard job too. But I think we really, like, we had a lot of conversations about, like, what does being a musician mean to us, and you know, at the core of that, it's being able to continue to actually make music. And so if there's one thing that feels like it's worth focusing on, it's that. But it's a catch-22, because if you have music and you don't promote it, then you're constantly in this environment where it's harder to actually dedicate the time to make the music. So we're exploring how do we also promote ourselves effectively. But I think, yeah, the main thing is, like, can we actually continue to produce music? Because we have not been great at that for the last many years. And this is the first bunch of songs that we're putting out, you know, in a short period of time, in a while, really. So hopefully we can do it. That's really the goal. It's like, just keep putting them out. Although I was, you know, I have a funny story for you, Suze. I was like, we've been talking about, let's just see if we can commit to like one song every 2 months. Can we do that? Right? A new song every 2 months. And there is this like big singles environment now. Like pretty much everybody's, that's all that they're doing. So the game has changed a lot. But Suzie and I are come from a period, and I'm sure you do too, Sheila, of like, you buy an album and you open the album, you look at the album art, and you read the lyrics, right? And like, there's a lot of nostalgia in music for us that whole game doesn't tap into at all. And it that feels a little sad, but also, you know, we can do only what we can do. But I noticed on my Spotify, or I don't even know what maybe I was reading something, but we're originally from Long Island, New York, another Long Island band called Bayside. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So they just put out a new song or something, like, I don't know. I didn't have time, actually. I was like in the middle of something, but I did notice some like comments on whatever I saw where people were complaining about like that it wasn't a full album or something like that, like because their fans have this attachment to like the albums that they've put out, you know. And even still today, it's like, well, you're not putting out a full album. That's not what I want. And so there's also something scary about that, because we've only really ever put out records before, you know. And is it going to come back where we have whatever 3 fans still exist in the world hanging out there being like, this isn't what I want from this band, you know, to hear one song every now and then. I don't know, but Anyway, that's my anecdote around that. But that's what we can do. So that's what we're gonna push towards.
I think you can't cater to everybody to make them happy. You know, you're gonna have the fans that like singles. Like I'm a person, I want a full album or like an EP. You know, where I could sit and listen, not just like, oh, it's one song.
Yeah.
4 minutes later, I'm done. You know.
Yeah.
So, but I get it. Like the attention span of younger generations you have to get them while they're sitting there in that moment, you know, or on that train ride.
Do you feel like they're like, how easy is it to really connect? You know what I mean? With just that one song.
Yeah. And I think you can, because like there's that one song like that's in every sentimental video. I think I like this little life. I'd never heard of that song until it hit like social media, and now I can't stop hearing it. It's like the radio station of.
There's another one too. I don't know if I'll think of it now. There are some, right? Like there are definitely some songs that can make it through and just be so impactful, like on their own without everything. But I feel like there's also some kind of magic to the album where you get to know the artist like sort of in a different and intimate way, and it feels to me like I wonder how intimately people are engaging with one song when they hear one song, other than just liking that song. Do they take like the step of going and seeking out the artist, or do they put that one song on their playlist and that's the one song that they know? And I don't know. It's interesting.
That's my whole trajectory is basically I'll hear one song that's very moving to me, and then I will go explore that artist. And like 20% of the time, maybe I wind up getting into an album and I'm like, oh, I like this a lot. The other 80%, I'm like, that was a good song, but the rest of this I don't really care about.
Yeah, you're not that into it. That makes sense.
Same.
Yeah, I'm like now trying to think of the song that I heard the snippet of, and I was like, but
It'll hit you like
I'll email it to you
2 hours later. So there's 3 questions we ask at the end of every interview. What artist or band do you feel is most underrated and why?
Underrated.
That's a big question.
That is a big question. Oof. Underrated. Like basically you're asking like who never really like exploded.
Just Radiohead, maybe. I'm kidding.
Like there's so many. Like
I'm trying to think of who do I think is so underrated, because when I love someone, I don't think about them being underrated. So now I'm trying to think about that bands that I love in the context of the world and how big they are in the context of the world.
or even in your circle of friends. Because like I listen to so much music and I'm telling my friends about it and they're like, it's not up my alley. I'm like, this band's going to be big, and they never are. They should be, but they never are.
What are some of yours?
There's a new band that I just came out last year called Baby Scalacci. They're like a punk band from the UK, and I think they're just on the cusp of being some like really big. But they've only got 4 songs out. They released their EP last year, and it was called Physical Only, and it's only available on CD or like an album. And there's like 3 songs that are digitally available, but they're like, if you want to hear the rest, you have to get the CD. And I was like, that's smart marketing. And I was like,
it is good.
And I was like, you hook them in with 3 songs and then you make them get the rest. And I was like,
that's a good idea. I'm trying to think. So I have like whenever anyone asks me a question about like what music I'm listening to, I automatically just get like the circle spinny wheel of doom in my brain, and I always have to go back to my like Spotify like playlist that I just like anytime I hear it, I'm like, yes, this one, throw it on there. So I'm literally I'm going to my own playlist right now to remind myself of what new things I have been I've been listening to see if any of them might be underrated. I suspect that most of them are overrated.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of context in terms of the things
Or
that
not
I've listened
overrated.
to and how popular they
Overrated.
are.
But
Suzie, you're cutting out a little bit.
like the rating system. Here said, let me know I'm back. Am I back?
Sort
I'm
of.
back. Tell me when I'm back.
You're kind of
Hello.
like robot
Can you
mode.
hear me? Can you
Yes.
hear me now? Super helped, right? So not an underrated artist, but a very well-rated artist, Adrienne Lenker, who is in Big Thief, who Jesse turned me on to. That is like, there's no way that she's underrated. She is fantastic and everyone adores her. But there is a band called Pine Grove that's out of like, they're probably not even a band anymore. They were sort of like in the, I have stumbled upon that record this past year. And that was a band that I think probably remained fairly small, but was like a really cool band and has really cool live record that I would highly recommend checking out. If you're going to check out one song, I would check out a song called Angelina. So that's Pine Grove. And the other one that I will give you is Mags, M.A.G.S. If he might be underrated because he's just put out his second full length, and it's like this fantastic blend of a lot of different genres. Very cool. Really big fan. So those are my two, Pine Grove and Mags.
I've never heard of either, so I'm adding those to my list to listen to today.
So happy. Yeah, I would love to know what you think.
Easy.
Very cool.
All right, let's see. I have a few. I'm also like, I'm looking up to see like how many listeners do these people have. Flock of Dimes. That's one of them. Juana Molina. And Tune Yards. I think those are my three. Where I'm like, I don't really hear people talk about them, and they're all amazing.
I think I've heard Flock of Dimes. I think they did a song with Amelia from Sylvanessa. I'm not 100%, but
Could be.
I feel like this is a calling in, but I'm not 100%. I've got music to listen to this afternoon.
The singer and I guess like woman who's founded that band was in another band called Y Oak, which I think they are like fairly well known. But I like the Flock of Dimes stuff a lot better. I'm a big Sylvanessa fan, but I feel like they're probably not. I feel like they're very well known.
I think it's hit or miss. Like, I know some of my friends know who they are, but then if I ask anybody outside of like a non-list like music circle, they're like, "Who? What?"
Yeah.
But I also think this generation, because in my office, I work with a bunch of younger people, and they don't listen to music the way that I consume music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll talk to them, and they're like, "I don't know that song." You know, I'm like,
If you check out Tune Yards, also watch her music videos, which I'm sure she also like produces and like writes the treatments for, and they're unreal. They're incredible. So just a very all around talent.
Awesome. What artist or band would you like to collaborate with, and why?
Collaborate with and why?
Do we only get one?
You can name whoever, dead or alive, it doesn't matter.
Dead or alive. Wow.
Well, that really expands things, doesn't it? I feel like
Let's create a rule. Only one.
Alive. Let's stick with alive.
One.
Okay. Alive and one.
Let's give some boundaries. Alive and one. Okay, I like that. I'm like, I'm probably, I can't do the one. I'm between two people who are Justin Vernon from Bon Iver and Chris Walla, who's a producer and was the guitarist in Death Cab for Cutie for many years. I think those are my two where I'm like, I just love everything that they do, and I would love to work on something with them.
Mm, I think this is kind of I think that I would want to collaborate with Jack Antonoff, who Bleachers and has produced like many artists, but I think I have like a pop brain a little bit, and I tend to like lean into a little bit more like listening for a hook, listening for a catchy thing. And I feel like a lot of the production stuff that he does and the writing is also pretty like I think we could probably do something pretty cool together if we collaborated. So I would choose that.
He's got a formula and it works.
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder. I wonder if it is. Yeah, I mean, I guess it is pretty formulaic. I really like pop music, and I like writing stuff that feels just feels good. And yeah, I think it would be probably a pretty successful collab. So if you're listening, Jack,
We're gonna make it.
yeah.
Want to drop your phone number?
Let it slide into her DMs.
In case that's right.
Okay, last and final question. What artist or band would you like to tour with and why?
I think without giving it too much thought, I would just go the Death Cab for Cutie route right away, because that was such a formative band for me when I was like in college and when I was first started writing music, and was like such a big common influence between the two of us. And when we started writing together, like I don't know if you know how hard it is to find someone that you can collaborate with where your taste matches, because there's nothing really that you can do to account for taste. Like if you don't like what someone else likes, then the combination is really difficult to get to work. And I think we found each other, Jesse and I, during a time when we had enough similar influences and things we were enjoying, that when we got to a creative place together, it clicked. You think that if you find unicorn, like the state that you're looking for, unicorns exist and be on every corner until you try finding a second one, and you realize that there really aren't that many unicorns out there. And so it was like we found each other, because it's not easy to collaborate with people, and I haven't ever found a better collaborator. Is a huge influence for me, and I think Jesse as well. And so wouldn't it just be full circle in some magical, beautiful way to tour with them?
Oh, Chris Wall has to be with the band, right? I think.
Yes, and that's your that's your dead or alive kind of, challenge.
Yeah.
But the band together. But the band has to get back together and we can tour them. Right. That's the contact we're talking about. So real lineup.
I saw them at the Opera House here when they toured. It was amazing, and I was still happy.
I know, so good. But
I think that was the first. There's a cool venue in Washington D.C. called the 930 Club.
Been there.
And I think that was the first band that I saw at the 930 Club. And I was tripping on mushrooms, and it was still one of the best concerts that I've ever seen in my life. And then many years later, we played the 930 Club, and it felt like really good to me. It's like this club has like a very solidified memory in my mind of watching one of my favorite bands and being in a state of mind that made me very happy. And now I'm playing here. Although we didn't have quite as many people in the room, but
that's an underrated club. Like that venue is a great venue.
Yeah, it is a great venue. It is.
That is all I have for you guys.
Great.
Awesome.